The moment I stepped onto the porch of that cozy little beach cottage, my second home, I knew something was profoundly wrong. I was only there to meet a potential renter, a routine task before the summer rush, but the small, familiar potted succulents on the railing were gone, replaced by cheap, plastic children's toys. The key I used was instantly stiff, as if the lock had been recently changed. When I finally forced the door open, the sight that greeted me froze the blood in my veins. My daughter, Sarah, was sitting on my antique sofa, nursing a cup of tea, looking completely and utterly at home, surrounded not just by her own belongings, but by 3 generations of her husband's family. Her mother-in-law was chopping vegetables in my kitchen. Her father-in-law was watching television, and her husband, Ben, was arguing loudly on his phone in my bedroom. It was like walking into an alternate reality where my private sanctuary had been completely colonized. The sheer audacity, the depth of the betrayal, hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just staying there. They had moved in. They had been living in my home for weeks, maybe months, without my knowledge or permission. My own daughter. I stood there, speechless, gripping the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. So, I have to ask you straight away, when you find out your own child has secretly stolen your property and set up an entire extended family inside, completely violating your trust, how far is too far? Was I wrong for the way I handled the swift, brutal eviction that followed? Tell me honestly, would you have been able to keep your cool? Let me give you some context, because this isn't just about a house. It's about boundaries, respect, and a lifetime of sacrifices. This cottage, the one they had invaded, was a jewel. It wasn't huge, maybe 500 square feet, but it sat right on the Carolina coast, a place my late wife and I had bought 20 years ago, intending it to be our eventual retirement spot. After she passed, it became my retreat, my sanctuary, the one place where I could go to feel close to her. I lived primarily in the main house back in the city, and the cottage was mostly vacant during the winter, which is why I rented it out seasonally to cover property taxes and upkeep. I kept the furniture, the linens, and all the small decorative items exactly as my wife had left them. It was precious to me. My daughter, Sarah, is my only child. I love her, of course, but our relationship has always been complicated. She's entitled, frankly, a trait I fear I inadvertently fostered by giving her everything she ever wanted. When she married Ben 2 years ago, I had concerns. Ben comes from a large, tight-knit, but financially struggling family. The Patels. They're kind people, genuinely, but they have a tendency to rely heavily on others, and frankly, they're messy. I remember Ben's mother, Mrs. Patel, once casually mentioning that they'd love a family beach vacation spot, right in front of me, which I immediately dismissed with a nervous laugh. Sarah and Ben themselves aren't doing great financially. Ben lost his job last year, and they've been living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rent on their small city apartment. They've asked me for help numerous times, and I've given them substantial loans, which, naturally, they haven't repaid. I always tried to teach Sarah independence, but somewhere along the line, she learned dependency and, worse, entitlement. The whole plan for this visit was to finalize a 6-month lease with a nice young couple, the Millers, who were relocating for work. I had the lease agreement ready to sign. I'd called Sarah a week prior, just to tell her I'd be in the area, and she'd been strangely aloof, short with me on the phone, saying she was very busy. Now I know why. It was the end of March. I pulled my suitcase out of the trunk, eager to have a quiet night by the ocean before the meeting the next day. I noticed the mail slot had been changed too. Instead of a pile of junk mail, there was a stack of utility bills lying neatly on the hall table. Bills addressed to Mrs. Anjali Patel. Ben's mother. That was when the cold dread turned into blinding fury. I slammed the front door shut behind me, the sound echoing through the small space, instantly silencing the chaotic noise inside. The entire living room, which I remembered as calm and coastal, was now crammed. There were extra folding chairs, cheap, dusty area rugs over my pristine hardwood floors, suitcases stacked against the wall, and the air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar spices and a general mustiness. Sarah looked up, her face draining of color as she saw me. She had the decency to look guilty, at least for a split second, before a defensive wall snapped up. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she stammered, clutching her mug. "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Sarah, what the hell is this?" Ben, having heard the commotion, strode out of the bedroom, equally shocked. He was wearing an old, stretched-out t-shirt. Behind him, Mrs. Patel, Ben's father, and two younger cousins I didn't even recognize, all crammed into my modest cottage. Froze like deer in headlights. Sarah started to speak, a rapid, panicked stream of excuses. "We just needed a temporary place, Dad. The apartment lease fell through, and we were only going to be here for a few weeks, honest, just until Ben's new job starts, and then Mrs. Patel and the family were just helping us move in." I cut her off, my composure completely gone. "A few weeks. The utility bills are addressed to your mother-in-law, Sarah. The locks are changed, and how exactly did you get the key to my house?" That's when the lie fell apart. Ben confessed, reluctantly, that he had a spare key from a time they came down to help me clean out the garage 2 summers ago. When their apartment situation became dire, Mrs. Patel, in her helpful way, suggested they move to my empty beach house. She had apparently convinced Sarah that since I wasn't using it, it wouldn't be a big deal, and they could save thousands. We planned to leave before the summer renters got here, I swear. Ben insisted, but his eyes darted nervously to the calendar on the wall, the one I had marked with the Miller's move-in date. Mrs. Patel then decided to step in, acting as the peacemaker, which only fueled my anger. "Richard, dear, we are family, and Michael's sister is here, too. She and her husband just flew in. It's just temporary. Think of this as a big, extended family vacation to save money. We will pay you back, promise." She said this while gesturing around the room with the knife she was using to chop onions, as if my property was a free-for-all resource for her entire extended clan. That was the line. Not only had they moved in, but they were now inviting more relatives. I looked at Sarah, my only daughter, standing silently, letting her in-laws justify the theft of her father's safe haven. That quiet acquiescence hurt more than anything. I demanded they leave. I didn't yell. I spoke with cold, controlled authority. "You have 24 hours. Get your things, get your family, and get out of my house. If you are not gone by this time tomorrow, I am calling the police and pressing charges for trespassing and illegal occupancy." The shock on their faces was immediate. Sarah began to cry, Ben began to plead, and Mrs. Patel instantly switched to aggressive victim mode, demanding to know how I could treat family this way. I simply walked out, got into my car, and drove to a cheap motel nearby, leaving them in the middle of their stolen dinner preparations. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. Sarah called and texted incessantly. She accused me of being heartless, of valuing property more than my own daughter, of not understanding their financial struggles. Ben's family sent bizarre, threatening group texts, vaguely implying I was violating their tenant rights, which was completely ridiculous as they had no lease, had paid no rent, and were squatting illegally. I ignored every call, every text. I consulted with my lawyer, who confirmed I had every right to press charges, but warned that involving the police would cause a huge, public family rift. I knew that, but the principle of the matter was overwhelming. They had violated the most fundamental rule of respect. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about my wife, and realizing that the person I had tried to raise would never have done this. So, here's the crucial part, and this is where I need your honest opinion. I had made the ultimatum, 24 hours. The clock was ticking. I was furious, yes, but underneath the anger was a deep, aching hurt. Did I just march in there and throw them out, risking a screaming match and public humiliation for my daughter? Or did I give in and find some family solution? That would only encourage this behavior. The Millers, my legitimate renters, were due in 2 days, and if I missed that deal, I'd lose a significant chunk of income. So that's the situation I was in, facing the imminent deadline, and I had to make a choice. Be the rigid, unforgiving father, or the perpetually exploited family ATM. Before I tell you what happened exactly at the 24-hour mark, and how I implemented my solution, I want you to pause right now and comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have served an official eviction notice and been strictly legal? Or would you have done something more direct, more dramatic, to make them understand the gravity of their violation? I didn't wait for the full 24 hours. At the 23-hour mark, I drove back to the cottage, but I didn't go alone. I brought my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, and a professional locksmith. It was about 4 p.m. I parked down the street so they wouldn't hear me coming. I didn't want a scene, I wanted efficiency. When I got to the house, the door was locked. The living room was noisy, clearly still fully occupied. I stood outside and knocked, but not gently. I hammered on the door until Ben finally opened it, looking disheveled and agitated. "Dad, look, we're packing, okay? We just need a couple more days," he started, trying to physically block the doorway. I didn't respond. I simply stepped aside, and Mr. Thompson handed Ben a professionally printed, official-looking notice. It wasn't an eviction notice. It was a *** notice of intent to immediately repossess property and change security access. ***, it was a legal formality, but it carried weight. Before Ben could even finish reading the first paragraph, the locksmith, who was a big, serious-looking man, stepped forward and began to drill out the lock they had illegally installed. The sound was deafening, a brutal mechanical screech that drowned out any protest. This instantly got everyone's attention inside. Sarah rushed out, crying, followed by Mrs. Patel, who started shrieking in Hindi, then switching to English to curse me. "You can't do this. We are family. This is illegal," she yelled, waving her hands wildly. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice calm, but radiating absolute finality. "No, Mrs. Patel. What ***you** did was illegal. This is repossession." I then told the locksmith to replace the lock entirely and to put in a new electronic keypad lock on the garage door, effective immediately. The sight of the physical process, the locksmith working quickly and efficiently, Mr. Thompson standing sentinel with his clipboard, and me, absolutely immovable, snapped something in them. They realized I was not bluffing. The pleading stopped, replaced by frantic action. They started hauling their belongings out onto the lawn, suitcases, boxes, cheap plastic toys, and the stench of their unauthorized residency tumbling out into the spring air. They worked fast, under the watchful, silent gaze of my lawyer and the cold glare of the setting sun. Sarah tried one last time, pulling me aside, her eyes swollen. "Dad, please, we have nowhere to go tonight. That's when I delivered the final, calculated blow. I looked past her to the minivan packed with her in-laws' luggage, and then back at her. "You have your vehicle, Sarah. You have plenty of family, and you had 24 hours. My house is now officially secured." I then looked pointedly at Ben's mother and stated, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I will not be prosecuting for trespassing today. But if anyone steps foot on this property again without my explicit written permission, the police will be called, and the charges will be filed." By the time the sun had completely set, the cottage was empty. The locksmith finished, handing me the new set of keys and the code for the garage. I walked through the house, finding it filthy. My beautiful coastal retreat was a mess of tracked sand, dropped food, and general chaos. The smell was the worst. But the important thing was, they were gone. I had won the battle for my home and my sanity. The aftermath, of course, was messy. Sarah didn't speak to me for 6 months. She blocked my calls, and when I tried to send her a gift for her birthday, she sent it back unopened. Ben's family completely disowned me. I became the family villain, the heartless rich man who kicked his own flesh and blood out onto the streets. A narrative they spread far and wide among our mutual acquaintances. I lost a few friends who bought their side of the story, but I didn't care. I had protected my boundary, and more importantly, I had protected my late wife's legacy. I hired a cleaning crew immediately. It took 3 days to deep clean and remove all the lingering odors. The Millers, the original renters, thankfully understood the situation and moved in 2 days late, paying a prorated amount. They were wonderful tenants, and the normalcy of having a legitimate, respectful arrangement helped heal the wound. Slowly, very slowly, Sarah began to thaw. It wasn't money or pity that brought her back. It was the realization of the collateral damage. She and Ben ended up moving into a tiny, much cheaper apartment, having to rebuild their finances from scratch. When she finally reached out, it wasn't an apology, but a quiet, tearful confession that she was ashamed of letting her in-laws pressure her into such a horrible, disrespectful act. She admitted she had let her own entitlement blind her to the damage she was causing. We are rebuilding our relationship, one fragile conversation at a time, based on a new, much firmer understanding of respect and boundaries. I still haven't forgiven Ben or his family, and I have made it clear that they are never welcome in any of my homes. The boat's truth: no, sorry, wrong story. The cottage truth is that it reminded me that love cannot exist without respect, and sometimes being a good parent means drawing the hardest line, even if it makes you the temporary villain. I saved my property, but I also, perhaps, saved my daughter from a life of dependency and casual theft. I often think about that moment on the porch. That was the day I stopped being the father who enabled and became the father who demanded respect. Like this video, if you were on my side, if you think I had every right to reclaim my property with force and immediacy. Subscribe for more stories like this, where family drama collides with absolute boundaries. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Was my 24-hour ultimatum too harsh? I'll see you all in the next story.